Hi, Serge Hazanov. He's the resident of Switzerland, and he's a professor in the college where he teaches math. He is a mathematician, and also he is a writer. So I've enjoyed a couple of talks before. We spoke in Russian, we spoke in French. We're going to speak in Chinese next time, right?
Absolutely.
And today, as you can see, we are using one of the most used languages on earth, English. All right, so I'm happy to talk to you again. And I would like to talk about your teaching experience, the differences between Western approaches and Russian approaches, your writing aspirations. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, everybody listening and looking at us. I hope there will be some. About teaching experience, yes, during my long life way, I had a chance to teach in Russian, in French, in Swiss, in American English systems. I have a bit of experience with the students of different descents coming from different cultural backgrounds, because the last 25 years I was teaching at an international college where usually in a class of 20 students there are 35 nationalities. So we have certainly great differences. During a long time when I grew up in the Soviet Union, we always had a myth that our culture, our education is absolutely dominant with respect to the Western education. It was certainly a myth who had some true things, but also some fake things here. My opinion is that in the Soviet education, positive things were with the good teachers, because every case is particular, because no syllabus a syllabus can be taught in a good way and in a bad way. It depends on the teacher. Teacher is a nectar who is performing, right? And so the literature, Russian grammar, it was taught rather well by good teachers, certainly. What concerns history, geography, you know very well that they were quite politicized. At the time, there was no psychology, very few philosophy. Mathematics was taught very well, but in a rather very theoretical way, quite influenced, I would say, by the French system, abstract and theoretical way, with not much applications. And for example, such domains as probability and statistics up to, let us say, the last 10, 20 years were not taught in Russia, because they were not much applied and they were considered as very easy by professional mathematicians. So even when I was at the university, they told us, you will learn it very quickly yourselves. While in the West, these two domains, probability and statistics, are taught in depth because it's a pragmatic approach. They're very much applied. But in general, I must say, it was a very good system which gave solid basis in fundamental sciences and certainly in general culture, because general culture, certainly, I would say that Russian youth coming to the West knows much more about the West than the French or English, American, Israeli youth who grow up in their countries know about Russia and other cultures. Certainly, you see, if you ask an average American high school student whether he had read Faust, or where they had read Garcia Lorca, I don't think they will give you a positive answer, except some cases, certainly. But in Russia, Russia was always eyes wide open to the West. It was a great, great advantage, right? And disadvantages, as I told you, not much pragmatism. The Russian students didn't know it, even now don't know much how to make conferences, how to speak in public, how to make discussions, debate in a good, educated way. These are the so-called difficult points, not very strong points. In the Western education, certainly I would say that in the European one especially, it is too much pragmatism, not much general culture, certainly not general culture. They say, I think that who wants to read books, he will read himself, right? Certainly the difference is that there are too much things to divert from learning, I don't speak only about devices, but all the social media, all the TikTok, etc., etc. So many students who are not very much motivated, they dive into it, and it's very difficult to take them out. While in Russia and in other, I would say, third world countries, there was a strong cultural push that students knew that to succeed in life, they must study, even if it was difficult, even if they didn't like it. It's not only in Russia, it is certainly in Asian cultures, in modern. I had many Indian, Chinese, Korean students who studied extremely harder because they knew that this is a way to succeed for them, I would like to cite a case from my own practice. When I was teaching at the Moscow State University, Lomonosov, I had, it was in the 70s of the last century and last millennium, I had a student from Northern Korea who was he was a PhD student. He was a nice student, not very brilliant, but absolutely capable to do a good PhD. He was working extremely hard, so hard that he was not taking any leisures, no, nothing at all. He didn't want to go to the theater, to the cinema, to have a lunch with somebody, never. I tried to invite him, to show him Moscow, to show him cultural life. No, he studied. Then, well, after his PhD already, he was going to go backwards, and he agreed to have a lunch with me, the farewell lunch. And he said to me, dear professor, don't please be angry at me that during all these 4 years I refused all your hearty invitations. The problem is I came from a poor country to learn your Western secrets, your Western technology, in order that with to bring it to my country, and so with this technology we will be able to beat you. You see, when he said to me, I was very much impressed by what he said. But there are some things to understand the motivation of such students, okay? And certainly there are some cultural things. For example, it's very interesting that in China, in Korea, the medical profession is extremely respected. And I had several cases when I had students in high school who were absolutely brilliant in sciences and mathematics. They would have been a wonderful scientist, but under the pressure of their parents, they went to medical colleges. The way I exposed to his parents absolutely clearly that I said, listen, he will be a good normal doctor, but if he goes to sciences, he will be an outstanding scientist. Why do you push him here? But the family wanted them to become medical doctors, and the students did listen to their parents and to their cultural backgrounds and went to their medical colleges. Certainly I was unhappy with this, but this was the reality. This was about my educational approach. And certainly, one more thing, the last thing, what I would say about education, it's certainly the lack of romanticism, because as in Russia, we studied literature very hard, in particular romantic literature. It was in our habit to apply it in practice. For example, to write love poems to a girl or a girl to a boy, whatever, right? It was usual practice. Even people who were absolutely not poets, they were doing it, writing poetical missives to their girlfriends, future girlfriends. Here, it is not the case absolutely. When several times I made a questionnaire, asked my students of 18, 19 years old, how many of them did write love poems to their beloved, and there was, I don't know, maximum 2 out of 30, maximum. See, maybe it is the time, but I think it's cultural influence as well. So it's too much pragmatic, too much romantic, and this is certainly a problem, because when psychologists know it, when you are pragmatic at the age of 40, 50, it's good. But when you're pragmatic from the age of 15, it's a bit sad, because you must pass all the stages in life. You must be romantic, you must be naive, you must make errors, etc. When from the beginning to the end, you follow the same path without going to the right, to the left, it is not very healthy from the psychological viewpoint. So this is about education. Sorry for my so long explanation. Then you asked me the question, if I'm sorry, the second question was about...
I would like to reflect to what you have said.
Right.
I believe there is a certain bias in the belief that our Russian education is superior to the Western. First of all, those that we compare with are not the average graduates, not the average students. There is a natural selection that leads that the best of the best end up in the West, especially it was in the previous times. If you would completely honest and compare the educational level of the average American with educational level with the average dweller of Soviet Union or Russia at the streets, the comparison might be not to the advantage of Russians. Also, if you're talking about the general culture and the politeness and the communication skills and so on and so on, you would probably find more attractive the Western way of communicating and openness and so on and so on. That's the one factor. It's like, you know, when you want to organize a match, like a soccer game or whatever, and you take the professionals and compare them to the average school students. So you, of course, will find the advantage of those that are professionals. This is the bias. Another bias, distortion, is that we have decided to ourselves which set of knowledge is the standard. Like Goethe, Faust, whatever, but we have no idea about things that Americans think as a standard knowledge. Geography, for example. Can we be that well in geography of the United States? Can we name all 52 in the United States and where are they located? No. But European countries are more familiar to us. And if you compare to the ability of the Americans to know what's going on locally and compare it with us, so it might be even superior to what we do, because it's known that Americans are well versed in what's going on domestically and don't care what's going on in the rest of the world. They even have this abbreviation ROW, rest of the world. So those are two biases that can destroy the claim of the superiority of Russian or Soviet education. So the set of the knowledge and those that we compare, those that actually managed to go through all the barriers and went to West. For example, if you take some Inuit that has 2,000 words to describe different kinds of snow, speaking of snow, he has his specific set of knowledge, which is completely unknown to people that are not living in Arctics, right?
Yeah.
We might say that there is a certain level of comparison that we might say that all men are equal. All people are educated to the certain level which is necessary and required by the society. That's how the Western education going. They just teach things that are needed in order to survive, in order to succeed in their society. They don't need Goethe for that. Neither do we. It's just a beautiful thing that maybe predominantly Jewish part of the population has imposed, that knowledge is something to be respected. And it's not necessarily true for Americans. They think that money, that's what should be respected. If you remember, in Soviet Russia, it was immoral to speak about money. It was absolutely unacceptable to be after money. At school, if your son would go and sell post stamps or something, it would be a huge problem, because it's speculation, and Soviet kids were not supposed to even think about selling things or dealing with money or any kind of commerce or anything, right? And it comes from the very different ideology that our education system was based on. That's why the lack of the practicism is very evident, right? Because most of the mathematical tasks that you would use in the West would be around money. And we cannot even imagine in the Soviet textbook that there would be a task to calculate the money. There were no tasks about money. Am I right?
Well, in some points, absolutely, that it is biased. All comparisons are biased, especially for the big countries. Yes, I totally agree with you. You can compare small countries like Switzerland and Belgium and South Korea, small countries where it is more or less homogeneous, and big countries like US, like Russia, it's very, very heterogeneous. So I agree with you to choose as a representative sample. It's extremely extremely difficult. And this is an example of all political polls. Right. But nonetheless, we cannot concentrate. You see, it's very, all the world culture, and it is the world culture that writes the history. All the world culture writes the history of human spirit. And I don't only speak about also religion, and Christianism also taught us how money is bad and disgusting, and the rich man will never go to the heaven. But believe me, it is not very nice when in a company with a nice, intelligent people, lawyers, doctors, etc. The talk is mostly about around the table. The talk is more in Europe or in America. The talk is mostly about sometimes politics, well, some drinks, food, right? But when you try to put out some question, a bit, excuse me, abstract, kind of, is Trump really bad? Or is Putin really good? Or shall we forbid arms, right? Or will there be a prosperity in the world, etc.? People get annoyed. And when you give some citations, quotes, literal quotes from literature, from philosophy, many people simply don't understand these alliterations because they're not trained in this. And it is a bit boring because we have world culture, and the greatest part of the world culture was created not in Russia, it was created in the West. So there were always greatest philosophers in England, Scotland, Germany, France. So we can't say that they were thinking only about money, right? So we have to take two parts. We need to eat, but we also have to feed our heart. So, but in some points about the myth of Soviet education, I totally concur with you. Right? This is certainly absolutely a good point. Good point you did. What I wanted to mention also, if it's possible, experience of journalism and hypocrisy. I had an opportunity to work as a journalist, to collaborate in Russia, in the Soviet Union, sorry, not in the Free, it was not Russia, in the Soviet Union, and in the West. And again, there was a myth which was supported all over the world, that Russian journalism was totally corrupted, politically oppressed, and Western journalists are free people. Again, this myth is a bit biased because reality showed me, yes, absolutely. In Soviet Russia, in Soviet Union, journalists absolutely could not open a mouth. Every free worder was oppressed. If you publish some article which goes slightly, says words not very much supported by the party, you are fired. Or even go to prison, right? In the West, it doesn't happen, but don't think, please, that journalists in the West are free people. They cannot say a lot of free words. Example, I was here my first years in Switzerland. This when the NATO bombarded Serbia, Belgrade, right? And there were certainly some journalists who loved Serbia, like people who wanted to write something against this. No magazines, no journals accepted this information. No, we will not take it. We will not take it. You see, the same as when journalists want to say something, how can I say, harsh, something very deep about the breaking of human rights in Russia, in Chechnya, in China, not only in America, but even in France, etc. Very often they are refused because at this moment or that moment, the political tendency of their governments is not to make conflicts with Russia or with China, don't touch these questions. You see, write another neutral question. So there are many journalists who really have their mouths I gotta say, wide shut. You see, so it's not that easy as it is. Certainly, if you write about culture, no problem, right? But with some expressions, but about some political things, economic things, very often the Western democracies, with their how can I say, very good program of human rights and freedom of speech, etc. When it concerns economic reasons, they are very, very kind, and with Russia, and with China, and with India. They don't want to say harsh words because these countries will impose some economic sanctions. So the butter on my table is more precious for me than the open word. Not always, but quite often. And I saw it, and I was very, very much impressed by these things. And I would like certainly to touch this question that we touched with you, a very hot and difficult question, painful, about this modern tendency when we want to, we were fighting against gender, about racism, against misogyny, right? When this was a wonderful tendency, but when we go to extremes, it brings again pain to the world culture. You know, for example, we are all aware when under the flag of fighting with racism, there were attempts to forbid several classical monuments of literature and art and movies, etc., on the pretext that in this chef-d'oeuvre, the racial questions were not treated properly, forgetting about the fact that it was this chef-d'oeuvre were created, like Gone with the Wind, right, 100 years ago almost, where the criteria were quite different. We cannot judge the past by the modern criteria. We cannot blame Kipling for racism, that we know he was sadly racist, only judging by our modern criteria, because Kipling lived in an absolutely different era. So we can acknowledge this, that he was quite racist, right? But he wrote about the burden of white man. But we cannot blame him. We cannot throw away the monuments to the people who have done great things and for creating universities and museums, etc., on the pretext that these people had something to do with the slavery or with some other aspects which are now absolutely correctly blamed by our laws and by our culture. We can acknowledge, we can add to their monuments that these people were involved in such activity, but to forbid the literary, musical, and other architectural, what I don't know, painting things on this pretext, we cannot do. It is not very, it seems to me, is not very valid, and many artists and writers and scientists, certainly in the world, in the West, in America, in Russia, certainly suffer from these restrictions being opposed to this by this hypocrisy. And so there are certainly this hypocrisy went to the fact, for example, I'm an amateur of chess. I don't know whether you have read or not, but in the wave of this game against racism, there were proposals that the chess is a racist game. Why they are black and white, and why the white begin? Why do the white always begin? Let's chess it, you see? So I think that this is a bit sad tendency which goes to an extreme, and we should go along this avenue, but we have to put some limits. We cannot go to infinity. Otherwise, it becomes an absurd. You see, what do you think about this?
I completely agree with you on different levels. But what I would like to say is that we tend to think that whatever the set of our beliefs is a standard. And we compare any other set of beliefs to the set of beliefs we have. And we have a tendency to think that our set of truths is universal, which is not. The relativity of the moral among the people of Earth is very obvious. We still have some tribes that might be cannibals and consume each other's flesh, and it will be completely okay with their set of beliefs. And if we will confront them saying, what you do, you eat humans, they would say we are way more humanistic than you are. We never kill more than we can consume. And you have world wars where you waste millions of nicely juicy people just to the waste. So we are way more humanistic, and you see, so this bias, and I insist that it's a bias. It's a bias because it's just like if you would immigrate 20, 30 years earlier than you did and came to Switzerland when you were 15 years old,
right,
you would have a completely different set of convictions. You would be way more the same as the youth in this country was at that time.
right, right.
So we who changed certain countries and customs and different things, we need to understand this relativity in the mental ways, and not to attribute to our set of beliefs the universal role. People, they tend either to be a good match to their society, to blend in, or they want to be rebellious. But it's always going in the plane of beliefs which are really important in this particular society. Like we all choose the role models to follow the steps of. Like if you will think whom you are following, you will probably list a certain number of writers, thinkers, philosophers, politicians that you have a great respect to. And subconsciously or consciously, you are acting and finding the ways to express yourself in the same way as your role models, as you understand them, would do. The same is those that you meet at the table. They have different role models. They have different standards, different understanding what you are supposed to do at dinner time. At dinner time, you're supposed to discuss culinary achievements, different wines. You don't speak about politics or religion because it will actually crash the dinner. It will turn into unpleasant discussion. It's not the place where you discuss those things. Where is the place? It can be educational sessions or something else, but that's not the place where you do this. In Russia, in our culture, we didn't have formal dinners too much. We spent most of our times at the kitchens. And naturally, the kitchen have become a place of the political, religious, and philosophical discussions, where we also consumed food because it takes a long time to discuss those issues. You get hungry and you're at the kitchen anyways. That's why one of my first books is named Kitchen Philosophy. And no Western will understand this term, while to Russian mind, it's very clear that kitchen philosophy is something which is homemade, something not very worth relating to. But another meaning is that it's something that we all love. That's why we all even have the reflexes when we need to consume food and we have guests. If we don't talk about politics or religion, we just cannot consume food. It's like a dog of physiologist Pavlov. We have this reflex. We need to talk politics and philosophy in order actually to consume food. Otherwise, we don't have a salivation. And Westerns, they think it's completely inappropriate to touch these topics. Like we, for example, think inappropriate to make toilet jokes when we eat, right? So it's the same when you attend this dinner and they want to talk about wine and you start talking about politics. It's the same as you come to the Russian table and you start with your toilet jokes, right? The time when we eat, it's completely inappropriate. So it's not the superiority of our culture of mind. It's it's just something deep that in our culture, because we didn't have this ability of free discussion. So we had to move it to the kitchen. And that's why we made this link between food and philosophy, all right? And I know it by myself, of course, that I sit at the table, the guests are coming, and I want to ask them, instead of do you like the meal, I want to ask them, what's the reason of life?
Sense of love, yeah. I agree with you in many points, absolutely, and this is very important that we are in huge part, this is discussion, certainly products of our culture, environment, yes. If you permit, I will cite one of my poems about this, because as I like philosophy, I was teaching it for many years, about existentialism, Жан-Поль Сартр. Экзистенциализм. Мы философии учились не за книжками, за все брались, пускай не в зуб ногой, усвоил через синяки и шишки я, что не Господь судья нам, а другой, что, как у Сартра, мраморно изложено, мы есть, когда другой на нас глядит, костьми ложимся и душой, и кожею, гордыню ощущая, страх и стыд, тасует время, встречи с расставаниями, и каждый день хвалим, гоним, любим, как первоклассник, с сердца замиранием оценки жду, поставленной другим. Ах, этот взгляд рентген, эфирный, каменный, кто вы другой? Чужак ли, недруг, брат, хранитель мой фортуною поставленный, мой черный человек, мой рай и ад, жил к лишнему стремясь и нужным жертвуя, к вершине шел, ведущий вниз тропой, и подражал другому столь усердно я, что есть надежда даже стать собой.
It's so good. I also want to say that there are very few people that are true intelligent people. There are a lot of people that pretend to be intelligent. And also, this intelligence is not connected to academic settings.
Yeah,
because I have met simple folk like laborers and truck drivers who actually are very well educated, self-educated. And I have met academics that just pretend being well educated and not have it even a simple understanding. They have just of some concepts, of some basic concepts of nature, philosophy, culture. Getting PhD sometimes is the remedy to compensate for this lack of intelligence. Sometimes, yes, sometimes it's a stimulus. It's like a drive to get those certificates, to have a proof that I am intelligent, because I have PhD. But during my life, I had a lot of conversations with very different people from very different backgrounds. And I would say that there are two kind of people on earth: those that are thirsty to the knowledge and those that are not. And they can be met in any layers of the society, both academics and just laymen and simple folks and so on. And it doesn't have actually any significant connection to the achievements of those people. And obviously, the person who is thirsty for the knowledge, he cannot understand how somebody cannot be thirsty to the knowledge. And sometimes you meet at the table, even at the conferences. I was surprised. I attended a couple of cosmological and astrophysicist conferences because I was writing a book, The Uncertain Universe. And I was surprised. They're not discussing any scientific issues when they're in private settings. It's like even bad manner to talk about cosmology or astrophysics at the dinner table. They put it away to discussions in the during the conference sessions. And me, as a freelance writer who came to this conference just to interview these people and speak about all these issues, I felt like I'm using a toilet humor jokes at the dinner table because I was raising these issues, and I felt the reluctancy on their part to engage in such conversations.
That's right.
And it was a surprise to me that I would think that people that have devoted their entire life to a very exciting, very, very exciting field of human knowledge. Where did we come from? How the universe works? They seem to be uninterested in these issues.
I understand. I totally concur. I wanted also you hinted me to speak about another hot issue, which is hot issue during the last 4,000 years, certainly anti-Semitism, especially because we are both of Jewish descent and we are both like religion, and you are very versed in different religions, I know. So it will be very interesting to speak about the origin of anti-Semitism. So me personally, if you permit, I say a thesis and then you will correct me, Maître. I treat anti-Semitism as a kind of a virus, especially we live in the period of virus, that is always changing during the 4,000 years, that is adapting itself. It comes from the Bible, where you remember certainly Balak says about the Jacob tribe, people who are dwelling apart. Right? So this is characteristic. So this is the question. So anti-Semitism comes because Jews always want to be peculiar, different, or from anti-Semitism comes from other reasons. And for Jews, it is a great choice, you know very well. When they were apart, they were persecuted for centuries. If they didn't want to embrace the other major religions, well, in the Roman Empire, paganism, or afterwards Christianism, in Arab countries, Islam, etc. On the other hand, those of them who embraced these major religions, it was not a salvation, because you know very well the Marans in Spain, the Jews who converted to Christianism, but in their heart they kept their faith. They were still persecuted not by Inquisition, not for their faith, but mainly for their blood. So it was purely a racial topic, right? Then you remember certainly during the Enlightenment, how in Germany, how it was treated, that the slogan was, I am German in the street and Jew at home. At home, in private. This was the principle, but also all these liberal things, liberal developments of Judaism led only to assimilation. So what is the choice for the Jews to survive with dignity in this world, to assimilate totally, what it happens certainly, right? Or to try to have, if they are religious, if they like Judaism, for example, or to find this fragile balance between Judaism and modern life, between keeping their differences, but on the other hand, living in a modern society, multinational society, with the norms that often contradict Judaism. So this is respectful of differences. We know very well from history, there are many examples that when Jews assimilated Jews tried to participate in the politics of their countries, new motherlands, in majority of cases, it led to tragedy. Joseph Flavius, when he was coming from Judea to Rome to Judea, at the end of the life, he joined, he became nationalist against Appian. His book. If you take, I don't know, examples of Trotsky, right? Trotsky, who considered himself totally internationalist, but for majority of the people, especially when they became chasing him, if he was a Jew. Take Léon Blum, the French president Léon Blum, who also didn't have a very nice end of life. Take Leon Feuchtwanger, the great German writer, who sincerely wanted to be German, but he was hinted that he will never be German, and he started to write in German about Jews only. Take all these political communist leaders after the war in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland. You remember very well that the history, how when the mood of the people turned about them, there were anti-Semitic slogans about them. So this is the question whether Jews should take their role of the Jews like doctors, lawyers, etc., intelligent people, or they should participate actively in the politics. You see, so this is the question. What do you think about this? What do you think is a good idea?
It's a very delicate question. The only way out is to define what is it a Jew. What is a Jew?
Yes, but this is a rhetorical question.
If you compare Albert Einstein to the rabbi, they are both Jews, but they are quite different.
Right.
If you compare Lev Trotsky to, I don't know, to Brodsky,
right.
Very different people at all. So what is a Jew? If Jewishness is DNA, the percentage of DNA in their blood,
Right.
then I think that the Germans, the Nazis, would have trouble if they could have an access to the DNA testing. They would find a lot of Jewish DNA in their own records. What is it? Jewishness? That's the question. And yes, and if we're talking about the world, if we abandon the idea of DNA and just being Jewish by blood, and by the way, I met people who were raised by Jewish, and they were very Jewish in everything that pertained to this nation, but they didn't have any Jewish blood. And vice versa. There are some people that were raised by not in a Jewish environment, and they have a lot of Jewish blood, and they are not. So we need to decide what Jewishness is. If we're talking about the world of ideas, it started from Bible. It started from a certain culture, as you said, 3,000-4,000 years ago, when everybody else on earth were polytheistic. These guys decided that one of the gods, that there were very few, and every tribe has own pantheon of gods. These guys decided that their God is the one, and all others are not true gods.
Absolutely.
So how offensive it is. It is very offensive. It cannot be really tolerated by your neighbors when you all of a sudden decide that your God is the God, and this God has said that in the first commandment. I'm the God, and you won't have any other gods.
Yeah.
So they have shot in their leg with the first moment when they became monotheistic. Because by saying monotheistic, they are saying that all other nations and their beliefs are wrong and against God.
I don't think all the rabbis will agree with this treatment, like you say. No, they said that God for them. But I totally understand what you said. This is a very deep question, eternal question, kids' question. Yes, but not all the rabbis agree with this. Yes, but I asked you this question, dear Boris, because I really always thinking about this and suffer, and my attitude to it changes during the years of my long life. I would like only to cite again one of my other poems about Babylon, because my family comes father's side from Spain, from Toledo. And I want to cite a small poem which treats this question. It's called On the Rivers of Babylon. Мы плакали, растает суета, как воды вешние, мне столько зим, что видится во снах родни моей стенанья безуспешные на тех, на вавилонских берегах. Молиться, мечтать мы были избраны, но обернулась в бой неблагодать, и из Толедо, как из рая изгнаны, в иных краях убежище искать, то верою гонимы, то погромами, к земле нас гнули, мы тянулись ввысь германскими и польскими просторами, да, матери России доплелись, с ней столько было прожито и пройдено, но на изломе судеб, мест, времен, швейцарский санаторий нынче родина, питание, покой и сладкий сон, жизнь, крестный путь от будущего к прежнему, не потому ль являются во снах молодые слезы, звонкие надеждами на розовых московских берегах, молодые слезы, звонкие надеждами на тех, на вавилонских берегах.
You're such a great poet, Serge.
So thank you.
Thank
So
you
this,
so
I
much.
am really suffering from this question. What shall I to be? You see, and particularly, you know, me personally, among all the modern great scientists and rabbis, certainly I appreciated mostly, if you know him, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Yeah, because contrary to other rabbis, he is not living inside the Talmudic Jewish culture. He was like a bridge between Talmud and the world culture. Even when he treats Bible, he's citing Aristotle and Shakespeare and Moliere, you understand? So he was like a real bridge. He was open to the world, contrary to many rabbis that I know. And for me personally, who was educated under the Soviet myth, open to the world, this was really a great authority, great moral authority. And this is reading his things that I understood that differences are very important, and one of the ways for Jews to survive in the modern society is to not isolate, but to, how can I say, to be tolerant and to be attentive to other minorities and their suffering. So if they should not be closed in their narrow community. So if, for example, I see that nearby to me one Arab is humiliated because he's Muslim, my duty as a Jew is to come to help. You understand? Or if I don't know, some Kurd or some Christian or some Uyghur is persecuted in China, I have to, it's my moral duty not to close myself in my nest, but to come to him. And I think only in this condition, maybe the peoples of the world could accept Jews as a partner in the world society and not only as people dwelling apart.
The best way to treat those issues is to immigrate to Israel and spend there,
you're right.
and spend there like 3, 5, or better, even 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
All our issues as Soviet Jews, as outcasts, as all those things are getting treated in the country where being a Jew is a norm, and not being one is not a norm. And you become an outcast among the Jews for not being Jewish enough. All right? Mm-hmm. And this make a great therapeutical effect, because you actually stop feeling that much being outcasted, because when you come to this country, you feel that you are not a real Jew. And I know how painful it is for people that were not part of Israel when it comes to feeling anti-Semitism and all those stuff. But when you actually lived in Israel and you're coming out, you become a bigger anti-Semite than real anti-Semite. I didn't express everything I have to say about Talmudic culture. The only glimpse I gave is how offensive it is to say that my God is the God and your gods are just fake gods. That's one of the things that explain the approach that Jewish idea in its origins is about. And of course, it will always create a very negative reaction in everybody else. I don't want to expand more. There are different points of view. We can talk religiously, the point of view of religion, or culturally, or economically, or psychologically. Of course, there are so many other nations that might possess very negative traits that are attributed to the caricaturical Jew, right? But the truth is that it all comes from the main idea of the monotheism. And once you decide that you are monotheistic in the polytheistic world, you will get this trouble. All right?
I agree. I understand. Yeah, Boris, I see that your time is coming. I only wanted to thank you very, very much for this wonderful talk. You've taught me a lot. I would like to finish with one more just recent poem that I just wrote before for you. It's about our youth, about old photos, which I'm sure you also like to look at them and see how different you treat them in respect with the different times. Старые фото, россыпи снимков давнишних пыльных, где мы юны, старомодны и стильны, ни животов, ни морщин, где голубые струятся фонтаны, чушью прекрасной рисуются планы, плещется смех без причин, где судьбоносный для лодок любовных быт незаметен на карточках ровных, видимо, все впереди, где мы поспешные, давшие обеты, рвем удила, чтоб пуститься по свету, юности пыл охладив, где мы к успехам чужим терпеливы, только звезде своей вере счастливой завтра глядим не назад, случаем посланы или привидением снимки, где нашей любви зарождение или, быть может, закат.
You are so good, really, honestly, and it's such a pity that there is no way to translate these poems into English and keep all its beauty. And but that's what I want to say. You are
Thank you very much.
You're a really great poet.
Thank you very much.
And,
Thank you very much.
It's my honor that we spent a couple of hours, even more, during our filming our videos. And I wish you all the best.
Yes,
all right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Boris. You are wonderful. Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you. Bye.